Stories are thickening plots. My name is Osadumebi, and every week I usually tell you a short story written by a Nigerian writer or author. But this is Series Week, where I tell you a story over the course of 2 to 7 consecutive days. Basically, however long it takes to complete the story. Series Week will occur once a quarter, and the stories featured will still be written by Nigerian writers and authors, and will either consist of a sequence of related episodes from one story or a set of stories linked by a common theme. That's the long and short of it. So without much ado, today's story is by Kesiena Olunwa, and it is the fourth part of the story titled The Good Neighbor. Catch up on earlier episodes for parts 1, 2, and 3, and listen in tomorrow for part 5. I was orphaned at a young age, and from then till now, I have no knowledge of any extended family. As long as I can remember, the orphanage had been my home. It wasn't the sanest of environments, but there was food, shelter, and goodwill donations which sustained us. I wasn't one of the fortunate ones who got adopted. Apparently, I was unhappy as a child. I was withdrawn and refused to engage with anyone. And by the time I got to my tween and teen years, my character was supposedly off. But to me, I preferred my own company. And I guess I just wasn't ready to let anyone else love me the way my parents had. My saving grace was my genius. Learning came easy to me, and every test or exam saw me ranking in the top 3. My brain literally opened doors I wouldn't otherwise have had access to. My primary school kept putting me forward for academic competitions. It was a win-win. They earned popularity, and I earned scholarships. By the time I was ready for secondary school, I had offers from some of the best private schools in the state. My primary school headmistress and a couple of other teachers had helped me to decide on one, a boarding school. Secondary school was interesting. I was socially awkward, and I kept to myself for the most part. And then one day, a classmate offered to pay me to tutor them for a couple of hours. I agreed. And the rest, as they say, is history. I had a stream of rich kids paying me for tutorials from their pocket money. By the time I got admission to university, my tutoring was a thriving side hustle. I had enough money to move out of the orphanage and get a place off campus. I met Bayo during NYSC. He made the socially awkward me open up. He was very persistent in getting to know me, and we sort of clicked as he claimed to be an orphan. A claim which, now that I think of it, was somewhat patchy, but I could never really verify. After NYSC, we started dating. He was very ambitious. He had a good eye for high-yield business opportunities, and he was not risk-averse. We got married, and I got pregnant with Elora within a year. A couple of years later, he got an offshore job which provided us our first home, and then I began seeing less and less of him. I had always been ambitious. It was one of the things Bayo had said attracted me to him. But after we got married, the ambitious attraction gradually began to fade. He increasingly put pressure on me to focus solely on building our family. He wanted more children. Lots more children. I wanted more children too, but I also wanted space so I could try to balance work and family and not have too many career gaps. I could never understand why Bayo had not only done a 180 on the topic, but he was quite vehement about it. It soon became clear to me that Bayo wanted full control of my life. Conversations about work and family always turned into an argument. He was not even willing to explore possible options so we could reach a compromise. I thought that since we came from similar backgrounds, being orphans and all of that, and since he knew he was the only family I had, that he would be more understanding. But he refused to see reason, and I was not willing to budge. It was one of the many wedges between us. I returned to work a few months after I had Elora, and he cut my allowance in half, stating my ambition would provide since I was stubborn. I was not deterred. If anything, he poured kerosene on fire. I needed to have a degree of financial autonomy. I needed to know I had a backup plan for me and or Elora in any event. Life was susceptible to radical changes. I had seen and lived it firsthand. My need to be my own person and hold my own had nothing to do with my love or need for Bayo. I couldn't help it if he chose to see otherwise. As I reflected on the events of the past few days, I was grateful for my stubbornness. Never in a million years did I think I would find myself homeless and getting a divorce. But now I was. Money was the least of my concerns. I shuddered to imagine my current state if I had given in to Bayo's build a family demands. My life would have played out worse than a Nollywood movie. Rage at men coursed through my being as I reflected, and almost immediately I thought of Alex. He shouldn't be trusted either. No one was this kind, not without strings attached. Only God knows what he has up his sleeves, and goodness knows what powder he has been using to keep me spellbound. I heard a knock on the bedroom door. It was Alex. It is uncanny how he always shows up when I'm thinking of him. There has got to be powder involved. Good morning. He gave a warm smile. His smiles were so reassuring. It had become the highlight of my mornings. Powder, Fisayo, powder. Stay alert. Good morning, I responded, managing to feign a smile. I was thinking, I think we should all go to church this morning. That is, if you're up for it, no pressure. Church? Church, as in church? I asked in utter confusion. Yes, church, he responded. Okay. What time do we need to leave? I asked. In an hour, he responded as he walked out of the room. Alex didn't strike me as the church-going type. His request came as a surprise, but I could not turn him down, not after all he had done for me and Elora. I hadn't been to church in years. I remember my parents never missing a Sunday service, and I have fond memories of being at church, especially with the snacks Mom gave me during service. The fondness dissipated after my parents died, though. I kept up with the Sunday routine because it was a requirement at the orphanage. But as soon as I went to boarding house, I dodged going. And by the time I got to uni, I had completely stopped. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away was one of the many refrains which stuck after my parents died. I did not see the point in being devoted to a God who took the parents of an innocent little girl. Sitting in church that morning felt strange, like a forced space. I was mad at God, so being in his presence was stirring a whirlwind of emotions I was ill-prepared to face. Elora, on the other hand, seemed to be having a lot of fun with Jessica. It was a new and exciting experience for her. She reminded me of my once-upon-a-time self, and I felt a pang of guilt for not taking her to church before now. The sermon ended, and there was an announcement about a small wedding ceremony which was to take place. Congregants were encouraged to stay to support the couple. Elora was beside herself. She was always watching wedding shows on TV, and to now be witnessing one in real life, she looked like she was about to burst with excitement. Sunday weddings were rare. In spite of myself, I was quite intrigued. It seemed a frugal choice by the couple considering the hype and expense that often surrounds weddings. As the couple emerged, my mind wandered back to my little ceremony with Bayo. I was lost in thought and did not notice until late that Elora was halfway to the altar. It was quite embarrassing chasing her down. She got there before me and held the groom tight across his legs. I finally caught up with her and prized her arms away from the groom's legs. And when I looked up to apologize, I found myself staring in the face of Bayo. Time stood still as I stared bewildered. I heard a soft mumbling ripple through the church. I was immensely confused. The cold and expressionless look on his face causing me to wonder if I had finally lost my mind and was beginning to see things. I was about to apologize for the intrusion when Bayo's look wavered ever so slightly, and I knew it was him. I could feel my blood begin to boil as the events of the past few days, even weeks, began to make sense. I was not the problem. Neither was Alex. We had just presented him the icing to the cake he had been baking. There is no way our divorce was finalized, and here he was, getting hitched. I'm sure there was a name for this, and considering we were not in a mosque, I am certain this was a crime. God really does work in mysterious ways. For the first time in a long time, I felt God was on my side. The mumblings rippling through the church had grown louder, and from the corner of my eyes, I could see a few phones being raised. This was turning into quite the spectacle. I looked at his bride. She was stunning, and I felt so sorry for her. This was meant to be the happiest day of her life, and it was about to be ruined because I sure as hell was not going to leave without saying something. Just wasn't sure what I was going to say. Elora started wriggling from my grip. She suddenly found her voice and said, "Daddy, I've missed you." And she went in for another hug. Bayo gripped her shoulder, holding her away from him. I could see Elora's face drop, and my heart sank. He could be mean to me, anytime, any day, but not to Elora. I could see the tears build up in her little eyes and begin to spill over. I will never know what stopped me from hauling myself at Bayo and clawing his eyes out. But I stooped down, hugged Elora and picked her up as she began to sob, her body visibly shaking. I felt someone begin to lift her off me and I saw Alex. He nodded at me, and I released her into his arms. She clung to his neck and wailed. Alex looked at me and nodded again, as if to say, "Do what you must." Then he turned and walked off to the side and stood comforting Elora, Jessica standing by his side. I turned back to Bayo and growled at him. "Why did you do that to your own daughter?" He remained expressionless, but I could tell his mind was racing, calculating his next move. "Daughter ke," he responded astounded. "Madam, I do not have a daughter. Surely, this must be a case of mistaken identity." My God, this had to be a low even for him. Elora's good cop, the one she adored. I stared into his eyes to be sure. No, this was no doppelganger. It was definitely Bayo. "Adebayo Agungbiyade, how low can you go? You can have beef with me, but denying Elora, your own daughter. What has she ever done but adore you? Derek. His name is Derek and not Bayo. His naive wife-to-be responded. I laughed. I see. Is that what he told you? Well, I know him as Bayo, and we've been married for well over 5 years. Madame. God, the nerve of this asshole calling me Madame. Like I said earlier, you must be confusing me with someone else. I don't know you. I have never met you, and I've never been married before. Now that I have finally decided to get married, please don't ruin our happy day. He pleaded, feigning sincerity. I laughed again. Ruin your happy day? Wow, is that what you think I'm trying to do? So what are you trying to do if not ruin our day? His wife-to-be quipped, getting angry. I looked at her and smiled. She was not out of place for trying to defend her husband-to-be. At face value, I was trying to ruin their perfect ceremony, and she was not having it. The only mistake she was making was defending a demon. Cameras were out in full force, and the church was abuzz as our voices carried across the auditorium. The pastor came down from the pulpit and pulled me aside. Although he had not yet asked the popular question, he needed to establish if my claims were valid lawful impediments to stop the proceedings, or just an unfortunate case of mistaken identity. I managed to calmly explain that I was indeed Bayo's wife, and that although his lawyers had served me divorce papers a few days ago, which I signed, our marriage had not yet been dissolved. I rattled off his lawyer's name. I stated our address, confirmed where Bayo worked, and a few other details about our lives. It was the pastor's turn to be confused. From his facial expression, some of the information I shared seemed to match what he knew about this Derek person, but they were all details which could be easily obtained. The pastor walked over to Bayo and pulled him aside. I could not hear their hushed conversation, but from his demeanor and gestures, Bayo was still denying all knowledge. I needed undeniable proof. Beyond reasonable doubt is what they called it in American legal dramas. I felt for my phone in my breast pocket. Thankfully, it was there. I brought it out and called Bayo's number. It was switched off. I glanced through my photo gallery, but with Bayo being mostly out of town, the pictures were only of me and Elora. I didn't even have a screenshot of our wedding picture. And damn me for not having yet scanned all my important documents as I've been meaning to do. DNA would take too long. I needed immediate proof. And suddenly it hit me. Maybe not in recent history, but we've had coital privileges, and I knew every inch of his body. I hurried to the pulpit and I grabbed the microphone. An usher tried to stop me, but I dodged him. I could see a sea of phones and amused faces as I began to speak. I can prove that this man here is not only my husband, but also the father to my child. There was a chorus of gasps, followed by a hush as everyone waited with bated breath. Kesiena Olunwa is a writer who resides in Lagos, Nigeria. She is an entrepreneur and loves networking. To connect and read more of her work, visit her Instagram page at fictiononlyng. Details and links will be in the episode description. If you've got a story you would like to be featured on this podcast, or a published book you want to make into an audiobook, send an email to info@osadumebi.com or send me a message at osadumebi on either Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or X. I look forward to collaborating with you. And if you've enjoyed this week's episode, please subscribe. leave a review, and tell someone, everyone, that stories are a good escape for a few minutes each week.